everyone. Hope you all are staying safe and healthy. I'm so delighted to be joined today by awesome Danny Pehar, one of the great thought leaders in the industry. Danny is known as best-selling author and cybersecurity specialist, keynote speaker, and cybersecurity trainer. Hello, Danny. How are you doing today?
Hey, I'm great, Harsha. Really happy to be here. I've been watching your videos for a while now, watching this show for a while now, and I'm like, man, I can't wait for her to call me. And then when we finally agreed to do this, I was very happy to be here. So thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so much for joining me. It's a privilege to have you as my guest. I'm so excited to learn from you today. But before we get started, one question I love to ask all my guests: how you ended up in this profession, and what was your career path that led to where you are?
You know, I know that this is a question that you like to ask your guests. And I love this question because I think answering this question, sometimes it's fun. Everyone likes to talk about, their journey. But I think it also helps for other people, younger people looking to break into the industry. It takes some of the mystery away from them. So for me, I met a lot of wonderful people in the cybersecurity industry and a lot of people that have some great origin stories with their journey, right? Some people that have been, in law enforcement and did, things like physical security, from there moved into cyber. Some people that have just been in IT for so long, they made the transition, some type of hardware, some type of software. For me, it was none of that. I don't really have an awesome origin story. Very, very humble one. 20 years ago, prior to me joining this industry, so if I take you back to the late 90s, you would have found me working at a Chuck E. Cheese. So if you went to Chuck E. Cheese in the late 90s, chances are we could have ran into each other. I was doing, one of two things primarily. I was making pizzas, or I was the guy walking around in that big Chucky costume, petting kids on the head or kicking them. And so if you ever kicked someone in that costume, shame on you, because it could have been me that you were kicking. But anyways, so did I want to be in cybersecurity? Did I know that this is something that I wanted? I had dreams of being, a comedian, dreams of being a motivational speaker. But, nobody wants to hire a motivational speaker when they know that you're the guy making pizzas at Chuck E. Cheese, because they don't really care what you have to say. and as for me being a comedian, it's just not something that was paying the bills. I wanted to get married. I was dating the same person for a long time. And I'm like, you know what? In order for me to get married, I need to get an adult job. And so I was really just looking for any place that was hiring. And I found a job opening, and it was entry level. And I walked in, and they were asking me, what do you know about cybersecurity? I'm like, I don't even know how to spell it. I don't know what it is at all. And I'm like, but I'm a really hard worker. I'm really friendly. I know people really well, and I can follow orders. And that's really what got me started into this industry. And the reason why I love telling that is because a lot of times people will ask me, and they'll say, Danny, I want to get into this business. Do I need to be an engineer? What kind of certifications do I need? What kind of, what have you? And yes, there are a lot of those in this industry. A lot of really, really smart people, highly educated, highly certified. You and I both know that, and we know a lot of those folks, but you don't need to be. I entered into this industry without any of that, and I still don't have any of that. I'm not an engineer, but it's been wonderful, and I've had a wonderful time with it. So kind of a very long answer to a short question, but I hope that I gave you what you were looking for.
Yeah, very inspirational story. Coming from a humble background and reaching to great heights, I'm sure your story will inspire many of us, like who give up early in their life, or were like, oh, what I'm doing, I don't want to do this. Your story will inspire many of those. Now about your book, I awesome at being awesome. Now I can relate from where this awesome word is coming from. It's a self-help book for people who hate self-help books. Well, I'm a big fan of self-help books, and I know it's all about entertainment and education, and is based on
Yes.
real life stories and lessons, and you learn a lot from these. Like small incidents in your life, we simply ignore, but there's so much to learn from even a small incident. So, what are the three top lessons to learn from your book?
So I think the three lessons that I'd love to discuss with you would probably connect to what we had initially talked about a career pathway. And those will be the lessons that I'll choose for today. And I think what I like about the lessons that I'm about to get into is the lessons talk about how maybe you are not the most qualified, maybe you are not educated, maybe you don't have experience or skills in something in particular, but still there's are ways that you can attempt to tackle something like that. And so the three ones is one, starting off with a great attitude. You know, at the end of the day, and you and I have met a lot of great people, we've met a lot of intimidating people, but at the end of the day, even a CEO, even somebody highly decorated, is still just a person. And psychologically speaking, people want to work with people they like. That's a big part of it. So I talk about being a person that someone's going to like. You know, this is something important that I learned a long time ago, even before I got into cybersecurity. You know, I talked about making pizzas at Chuck E. Cheese. One of the things that I would notice anytime we would get a new employee, and I'd be the one that would train them, is the one thing that all new employees had in common when they would make their pizzas is the first pizzas were never that good. And they took them a long time to make. They were kind of messy, a little bit all over the place. Of course, because it's their first day, right? They're not meant to be good on this day. But what I noticed about skill is it always improved with time. Didn't matter how bad you were on the first day, give me a couple of days with you and you'll turn into a pizza making ninja. You'll be really great. Okay, so skill does, when I'm working with someone, I don't need you to be the best. You will get better over time. However, whenever somebody had a bad attitude, they showed up late, they weren't very pleasant to work with, that got worse with time. The more comfortable they got, that got worse. So when we're going to a new place and starting a new career, we really want to push that attitude. We really want to show, listen, I'm the likable person. You're going to like working with me, and I'm willing to work. So that's the first thing, is attitude. The second thing is the importance of the basics, okay? So yes, when we talk about tackling certain topics, we talk about cybersecurity, holy cow, that can get very complicated. I look at even how much has changed over the last 20 years. Wow, a lot to learn, right? But you know what? Never underestimate the power of showing up on time, of calling somebody back when you say you're gonna call them back. Maybe you don't know everything there is to know, but be the person that's going to find out and be the person to follow those basics. I remember a story about a week after I had started. I was somehow conducting this call. I don't know how this ended up happening, but I was asked to arrange this call. And one of the people on the other end, I'm allowed to say this now because it was 20 years ago, but one of the people on the other end was Toronto Police, and they wanted to talk about this cybersecurity project. And then, of course, there was the people from my organization. So I had a bunch of engineers from my organization, a bunch of engineers from Toronto Police, and I'm running that call. And for me, I felt like everybody on this call knows what they're talking about except me. I'm the only person that doesn't understand a word coming out of anyone's mouth. But I ran the call. I would ask, okay, Toronto Police, and I'd call out certain names. What do you have to say? Remind us again, why are we doing this call? Like, what are you looking from us? And then I'd say, okay, other team, what do you think about that? And I would just keep going back and forth, right? Then I would talk about timelines, next steps, blah, 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 recap everything as best as I could, send out the details. That's it. I hang up the phone. When I hung up the phone, I felt terrible. I did the best that I could to do the basics, but that's all I was doing. I didn't understand anything. And I'm like, I feel like a fraud. Everyone's going to be like, whoa, Danny doesn't belong here. Like, I really felt like I don't belong. And I'm like, everyone's going to know this guy's, what's he doing? He doesn't belong here. He doesn't know anything about cybersecurity. But the Toronto Police, the lead at Toronto Police, they contacted me and they said, Danny, they said, I want to thank you so much. That was the best run call I've ever been on. They're like, we had so many engineers on our side, so many engineers on your side. You really kept us in line. And I was like, you know what? Yeah. When you're really good at nailing the basics, you are bringing incredible value. And then the last thing, of course, is communication. And maybe I might not know exactly what I'm talking about, but if I'm really clear with how I communicate my ideas, I will get my point across. I'll find out how to ask for help properly. And I'm always going to be that person that's very easy to listen to. And so for me, the lesson that I learned there about the power of communications a long time ago, it's in elementary school. So I talked about humble origins into my career. I had humble origins for everything, right? So grew up very poor, and two older sisters. A lot of times I'd have to wear, their hand-me-downs for my parents to save money. And in elementary school, when you're wearing like as much pink clothing as I was, in the '80s, that's
Yeah.
a tough day, right? And so, I would have kids that would make fun of me. I would have kids that would, I had this one t-shirt and said, I love Bon Jovi, and it had his face in the middle of a huge pink heart, right? And I do love Bon Jovi, but again, in elementary school in the '80s, that's a tough shirt to wear when you're a boy, right? And so I remember this one day, they were walking over, the teacher was out of the class, and I could tell by the way the guy was walking over, I could tell he was coming over to make fun of me. And so I'm telling myself, Danny, just keep quiet, keep your mouth shut, keep your head down. This guy's going to say something, he's going to make fun of you, and then he's going to leave. And because that's what I would always do, right? I'm pretty quiet. I mean, when your shirt says I love Bon Jovi and you're a boy and it's in the '80s, you're not going to have too big of a mouth, right? And so I'm like, I'm going to keep quiet. And so he says to me, hey, Danny. And what he wanted to do was he wanted to give me something called a burn. That's what it was in those days. You would insult someone and you say, what a burn, you've been burned or whatever. And so he says, hey, Danny, nice shirt. I would have bought that same shirt, except my penny rolled down the sewer drain. Ha ha ha, hilarious. Of course, he's indicating that my shirt is so cheap, it's only worth a penny, and blah, blah, blah. Little did he know I got the shirt for free, so it's not even worth a penny. But anyways, so as he's saying this insult to me, I'm saying to myself, keep quiet, just ignore it, head down, don't say anything.
Yeah.
And no sooner does the last syllable leave his mouth as he's saying, and my penny rolled down the sewer. Well, all of a sudden, I turn around and say, well, why would that be a problem? Isn't that where you and your family live? And all of a sudden, he was shocked. The class was shocked. No one was more shocked than me. I was like, where did that come from? Right? And then I'm like, why did you say that? Why did you say that? So he goes to say something else. He's struggling now. He's shaking a bit, right? And I reversed it on him again. Next thing I know, I started taking out the whole class, right? And I was like, holy cow, I'm good at this. And what I saw was an immediate shift of power. Now, what changed for me at that time? Was I suddenly wearing better clothes? Did I suddenly look different? Did I suddenly have money? No, none of that changed. What changed was I knew what to say and I knew how to say it. And that's when I realized, even when you're coming from a position of weakness, if you can focus on that, if you can know what to say, know how to say it, you will have strength when everything else is weak, when everything else is rough. So that's kind of what I like about that. Is it was funny because I was talking to a school about this a while back, and the teacher had pointed out, they're like, Danny, I don't know if you realize this, but they're like, but the way you explain, attitude, basics, communication, they're like, that's ABC. And I was like, holy cow, I didn't even realize that, but it actually lines up quite nicely. And that's when I came up with the idea, I want to put this in a book. And it's really designed for people to say, you might think you're tackling something that you are not certified, that you are not qualified, that you are not skilled or educated for, but that's okay. Focus on bringing the right attitude. Focus on following the basics, show up on time, and focus on communicating extremely well. You focus on that, the rest will follow. The skills, the experience, all that stuff will come with time, but nail those three things. So in short, that would be my advice for being my favorite three tips from that book, especially as it relates to what we're talking about.
Yes, great. Yeah, skills is something you develop over time, but yes, these three things and communication is the key. And we see that the unique perspective you bring to your cybersecurity awareness training, the way you communicate this message to people that it's everyone's responsibility. So because you are a comedian, you are a motivational speaker, and you combine this with your cyber experience, that's where it helps to really understand the importance of cyber in our life, not only with organization, but our day-to-day life. So
100%.
yes. So what is your philosophy to spread cybersecurity awareness?
So I think one of the biggest things that I see is whenever I'm trying to tackle something, I try to look at the problem. What's the problem that I'm trying to tackle? And I think most people, when they try to tackle the problem, as to why they're delivering cybersecurity awareness, most people see the problem stems only from a lack of information. In other words, people don't know what to do. That's why they're not cyber safe.
Yes.
That is part of the problem, absolutely, but it's by far not the only problem. A big part of the problem is a lack of motivation. Most people simply don't think that they're a target. Most people don't think, hey, why would somebody come after me? Oh, they're coming after my boss. They're only coming after the banks. Not a problem for me. Most people don't know what the bad guys actually want. A lot of people will say to me, Danny, I've got no money. I've got nothing but debt, so I'm totally safe, which is not true. And so what I find is when I approach a solution, if I was to approach a solution, thinking the problem is only coming from a lack of information, I then give you all these tips. And I say, hey, Harsha, I got all these great cybersecurity tips for you. Do this, do that, do this, do that. Don't do that, what have you. And you might be thinking, yeah, Danny, I don't care about any of this. I'm not going to pay attention because I just don't think it's real. So when we just approach it with that, we're missing the mark. We really have to get the audience to buy in, whoever your audience is. Maybe it's your family, maybe it's somebody at work, but you got to get them to believe it. Once they believe it, the information is going to flow that much easier. It almost starts to take care of itself because then you don't have to give them every tip. They'll be coming to you and they'll say, Harsha, I want to learn more. What else can you teach me? Like, whoa, like you've convinced me. And so get them on side. The way that I like to get people on side, and where I also see a lot of places might miss the mark on this, is I like to get them on side really the same way that I get anybody on side about anything, is make it about them. You know how many times I've been working with an organization and I get called in, maybe it's in person, maybe it's virtual, and the person introducing me might say something like, you know, this is really important to our company. If a cyber breach happens, it's bad news for our company. I've heard some people saying it's bad news to my bonus. I won't get bonus if this company gets breached. And I'm thinking to myself, none of those people care about your bonus. None of those people care about that. We really need to say this is about protecting you. This is about protecting your families. Because one, it's true, right? Of course, especially now more than ever with everyone at home and children at home, spouses at home, employees at home, right? So we're all at home, we're all vulnerable, but it's also very helpful to the organization. You want to get someone to care, you make the lesson about them. Once you do that, the information part of it, that's going to be the easy part, and the tips will really start to take care of themselves.
Yeah.
So as you can see, I like lecturing about this because I almost feel like I started yelling, but I'm going to calm down. But yeah, great question.
Because when someone says, yeah, why will hacker target me? It's like, it's everyone's responsibility. And the way you send this message across, it's very easy to understand that this is the way you can be targeted. This is why you are vulnerable. So that's where people start paying attention. Oh, yes.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So now I have an out of box question for you.
I like those.
I remember in one of your interview, I came across your story on white skates.
Yes.
Yes. And I love the belief that there are so many real life experiences one can laugh about and learn from at the same time. Tell us about that story.
So that story is, man, that story is one I feel like I've been telling for a very, very long time because I have. So I talked about before how, I would wear my sister's hand-me-downs. I had two older sisters, and to save money, my parents would just have me wear a lot of their stuff. And our school had an ice skating program. And so naturally, when it was my turn to enter that program, my dad's like, all right, well, you just wear what your sisters had. And so, of course, where this created a problem was, I don't know what skates look like now. Honestly, I don't. But back then, there was two types of skates. There was white skates for girls, black skates for boys. That's it.
Yeah.
So of course I'm showing up and I'm the only boy that's got white skates. And of course the kids, very, very easy to make fun of somebody like that, right? And I remember begging with my parents, please, please buy me these skates, to help me out here. Like this is, this is really painful. And but they didn't want to. But my dad, one day he decides, you know what, I'm gonna paint them for you. I won't buy you new skates, but I'm gonna paint them black. So he paints them
Interesting.
black, and I'm like, awesome. That's good enough. And I was showing those skates off to everyone. Look at my skates, are so great. It's black, blah, blah, blah. It's awesome. So then I get on the ice, and I'm on the ice for a little bit, and I start hitting the boards, and some of that paint starts to chip. And I look down, I'm like, hey, no big deal. It's still mostly black, just a little bit of chip and a little bit of white that you can see. And those kids, they must have had great eyesight. They were laughing from all the way across the rink, and they're like, look, they're just painted, they're white, and they're pointing and they're laughing and what have you. And I'm like, holy cow, this is horrible. And so I remember I was talking to a friend about that afterwards, and they were saying to me, as I'm telling the story, they kind of start to laugh, not laughing at me, but kind of laughing with me. And then I kind of start to laugh, and we're both laughing. We're just like, I can't believe this, right?
Yeah.
And so by the end of it, we're both really laughing hysterically at just the absurdity of what happened. And so then they're like, it's too bad that you had a bad day. They're like, but that's a really good story. And I remember that line really, really stood out to me. Bad day, but it's a good story. And I kind of started approaching things when I would come across something that would frustrate me, something that was bad. And I started thinking, can I find something good within this bad thing? And on that story, on that story, it's funny because I look at how much good came from my life by telling that. I'm telling that story. I was telling that story at parties, at bars, at whatever. So many people would ask me, friends who'd known me for a long time, who've heard the story, would say, hey, Danny, can you tell that story again? Then I wrote about it in the book that you had referenced, but I also wrote about it in a children's book. And I made a completely different children's book about anti-bullying, and I used that for the children's book. But then I talked about it in a comedy show when I would do comedy. I talked about it during motivational speaking. I would talk about it, like I talked about this on TV. So much good came from this thing that at the time I would have considered was the worst day ever,
Yeah.
right? And so I find that, one of the things that I like to do is anytime I'm going through something bad, I try as hard as I can to look for something good. And sometimes that something good is so small, right? It's the tiniest thing, but I find it, however tiny, and I try to hold on to it as hard as I can until I get through the bad. And I find that sometimes really that's the best thing that we can do, right? If you look at, let's say, what's happening with COVID-19, for a lot of people, really, really bad stuff, really, really scary stuff. But if you look deeply, maybe you can find one thing that you can hold on to help get you through it. And that's really is something that's been, to those that know me well, those that know me best, will often say to me that I'm fairly positive and I like to look on the bright side. But it's not so much that I like to look on the bright side, but I'm trying to always look on the bright side. That's really, I think it's something that I think positivity
Yeah.
is not just a trait. I think positivity is a skill, and I think it's something that we need to work at. And I think it really helps you essentially get through the day. And I think if we've learned anything this year, if 2020 has taught us anything, is sometimes you just need to make it through the day, right?
True, yeah, and great, great. Many times we miss this tiny message. We are
Yeah,
so busy in so many things that we miss a tiny message that life is giving to us. And I really
100%.
like, yeah, I really like this idea that when you laugh at life, it becomes easy to get through the situation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
Thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure. I learned so much from you today.
Always a pleasure talking to you, Harsha. Absolutely love this, and I love that you're doing these sessions.
Thank you so much, Danny.